At the break of dawn, as the first light casts a mysterious glow over the horse fields, 16-year-old Amanda finds herself unexpectedly thrown into a horse corral by mischievous friends. Amid mocking laughter and secretive schemes, she stands face to face with Thunder, a notoriously fierce stallion with a reputation for being untamable. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. Thank you. It was a crisp, tranquil dawn, the kind that kissed the skin with a light mist and carried whispers of the countryside. Amanda, 16 years old and already bearing the marks of hard work on her hands, walked barefoot across the damp earth of the barnyard. Each step landed softly, echoing a calm rhythm as the sun timidly peeked over the horizon. She paused at the weathered wooden gate of the corral, resting her forehead against its frame. Closing her eyes, she took a deep breath. The scent of hay, wet soil, and aged leather wrapped around her like a familiar embrace, grounding her in the moment. "I don't understand why you choose this over the town square," her aunt had once said, shaking her head in exasperation. Amanda had simply smiled, offering no reply. No one ever understood. For Amanda, every horse carried a story, a spirit. Among the pounding hooves and flowing manes, she found a peace no conversation or laughter from the other girls in town could offer. The barn was waking up now. The soft nickering of horses and the rustle of hay signaled the start of the day's work. In the distance, the faint chatter of boys reached her ears, a sound she knew all too well. They were always laughing, often at her expense. "Well, barnyard princess, when are you going to stop smelling like horses and start smelling like perfume?" The mocking voice of Alexander, the oldest in the group, cut through the morning stillness. The others burst into laughter, their collective jeers slicing through Amanda's patience like a blade. She turned to face them, her gaze steady and unwavering. "I'd rather smell like freedom than the fear you all carry with you," she shot back without hesitation. A tense silence fell, thick and charged like the air before a storm. Alexander's eyes narrowed in surprise, and the other boys shifted uncomfortably, caught between Amanda's defiance and the sting of her words. There was something different about her that day, a spark that refused to be extinguished, a resolve they hadn't expected. The scraping sound of a horse's hoof against the ground broke the tension, as if even the animals sensed the shift. Gradually, the boys scattered, retreating with nervous chuckles to their tasks. But Amanda knew the reprieve was temporary, a deceptive calm before the storm. Watching them from the corner of her eye as they walked away, she noticed Alexander leaning in to whisper something to one of the others. She clenched her jaw and returned to her work, her fingers trailing gently through the mane of a chestnut mare. The warmth of the horse's body and the steady thrum of its heartbeat beneath her touch offered a fleeting comfort. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, pouring golden light over the barn, an uneasy shadow clung to Amanda like a second skin. Her ears picked up snippets of laughter and sidelong glances from the boys, warning signs she had learned to recognize over the years. They were plotting something. She could feel it in the way their hushed voices and conspiratorial looks coiled around the air. The tension settled like a knot in her stomach as she continued her routine. Hours dragged on, and the unease only deepened. The boys moved like shadows through the barn, their sly smiles and whispered exchanges, sending ripples of unease through her. Amanda, crouched beside a soft-coated bay mare, worked with practiced determination, though her heart raced with every stifled laugh she overheard. The mare, accustomed to Amanda's gentle hands, snorted softly, lowering its head for one last stroke before Amanda stood, the nagging feeling of unrest gnawing at her. The wind carried with it the rustle of dry leaves and something intangible, something heavy and foreboding that set her nerves on edge. What are they up to now, she wondered, wiping her hands on her linen apron as she straightened. The boys were nowhere in sight, but their laughter lingered, echoing faintly off the barn walls like the distant rumble of a storm. Then she heard it, the unmistakable rhythm of boots pounding against the ground. Turning her head just in time, she saw Tommy, the youngest of the group, sprinting toward her. His eyes were wide, his face flushed with urgency. "Amanda, hurry! Something's wrong with one of the horses!" A breathless voice called out, the words tumbling over each other in panic. Amanda felt her chest tighten as an instinctive wave of worry washed over her. The way the boy's hands moved, combined with the urgency in his eyes, seemed genuine, but something about the tremor in his voice planted a seed of doubt. "Who is it?" she asked cautiously, brushing a strand of brown hair from her forehead. Tommy, still catching his breath, gestured toward the paddock on the far side of the yard. "I'm not sure, but you have to come now." The urgency in his tone pushed her to move, though a knot of mistrust twisted in her gut. Her ingrained sense of duty, however, was stronger, urging her to follow him without hesitation. With long, purposeful strides, Amanda crossed the yard as the setting sun cast elongated shadows across the ground. The whispering leaves and the crunch of hay beneath her boots accompanied her every step. From a distance, a group of boys watched from behind the barn, half hidden, their grins betraying the mischief they were about to unleash. None dared to make a sound, holding their breath as Amanda followed Tommy toward the farthest part of the stable, where Thunder's enclosure awaited, a striking white stallion of renown. Tommy stopped abruptly in front of Thunder's paddock. Amanda, her pulse quickening, tried to suppress the unease building within her. The stallion stood on the other side of the fence, his luminous white coat gleaming in the fading light, his dark eyes alert and calculating, his ears twitched, swiveling to catch every sound while his nostrils flared, taking in the scent of unfamiliar visitors. "Tommy, what's wrong with Thunder?" Amanda asked, her voice steady, though a thread of unease wove through her words. The boy avoided her gaze, looking at the ground instead, and that was enough to deepen her suspicions. Before she could react, a sharp metallic sound rang out behind her, the unmistakable clink of a bolt sliding into place, and the door slammed shut. Laughter erupted behind her, sharp and mocking. "Let's see how the princess handles her princely steed now," Alexander jeered, his voice brimming with ridicule. The other boys joined in, their faces alight with a blend of amusement and anticipation. Amanda turned toward the paddock, her heart plummeting. She was trapped. Fear clawed its way up from her stomach, tightening her throat and constricting her chest. Thunder snorted, shaking his thick mane with abrupt movements. Amanda knew the stallion's reputation all too well. No one but Mr. Benjamin dared to handle him without a solid barrier in place, and now here she was, heat radiating from her fear-stricken body as the horse's unyielding gaze bore into her. "What did you do, Alexander?" Amanda whispered, though her voice was lost amidst the laughter that began to fade as the boys retreated, still watching her from a safe distance. A flash of memory struck her, a moment months ago when Carlos, one of the stable hands, had made the fatal mistake of testing Thunder's temper. Overconfident and reckless, Carlos had approached the stallion from behind while he was distracted. The result had been devastating. Thunder, startled, lashed out with a powerful kick, leaving Carlos with a shattered leg and months of recovery. "Horses never forget what scares them, Amanda," Mr. Benjamin's deep voice echoed in her mind. She could still picture his weathered hands as he cleaned the reins that day. "Treat them with respect and calm, or you'll pay the price." Those words rang in her ears now, a distant echo grounding her in the present. The heat of her fear transformed into something else, a fierce determination. She lifted her chin, planting her feet firmly on the ground. Losing control was not an option. She knew that any sudden movement or impulsive action could provoke Thunder's wild instincts. The stallion took a step forward, lowering his massive head in a gesture that carried a strange curiosity. Thunder's ears tilted slightly forward, catching every sound, every shift in Amanda's breathing as she fought to remain steady. Each thud of her heartbeat echoed in her ears, but a quiet determination rose within her chest. Instinct whispered to her, urging calmness, advising her to make each movement deliberate and assured. Amanda, hyper-aware of every detail, every gesture, every signal she might convey to the animal, took a deep breath, letting the air fill her lungs and soothe the trembling in her hands. She kept her arms at her sides, resisting the urge to raise them or move too quickly. "Don't show fear," she reminded herself silently, recalling Don Benjamin's words. "Horses pick up on everything inside you, Nina. If you give them peace, they'll return it. But if you give them fear, they'll magnify it." Thunder took another step forward, now only a few feet from her. Amanda could see the gleam in his dark eyes, a glint that held both caution and curiosity. In that gaze was a spark of something deeper, something she'd never seen before, even after years of working with horses. It felt as if Thunder recognized something in her, something familiar that made him lower his guard, even if just slightly. Across the paddock, the boys watched in stunned silence, their earlier laughter muted as their eyes locked onto the unfolding scene. Alexander, always the ringleader of these pranks, bit his lip, a mix of nerves and astonishment flitting across his face. None of them had expected Amanda to stand her ground, to meet Thunder's gaze without flinching or stepping back. They had been certain she would falter, that fear would drive her away, and that the towering presence of the horse would overwhelm her. But what was happening now was something they couldn't grasp. Without breaking her gaze, Amanda slowly raised one hand, her movements fluid and deliberate. Her fingers were outstretched, empty, her intentions transparent. "I'm here, Thunder," her gesture seemed to say, "and I mean you no harm." Their eyes met, and for a moment, time itself seemed to pause. Thunder let out a quiet snort, shaking his mane and stirring the dust around them, as if he too felt the tension thickening the air. Yet he didn't retreat. Instead, he tilted his head slightly toward her, his ears swiveling in her direction as he stretched his neck to close the distance. The fine hairs of his muzzle brushed against Amanda's outstretched hand, and she held her breath, knowing that any sudden movement could shatter the delicate connection. Her eyes shone with a mixture of awe and reverence, the weight of the moment pressing down on her like a revelation. In that instant, she felt she had touched something profound, something beyond words or teachings. It was as though she and Thunder shared an unspoken understanding, a quiet truce that needed no explanation. She knew she wasn't merely standing before an animal. She faced a being with emotions, fears, and dreams of his own, a soul that, like hers, had learned to be wary. "It's okay, friend," she murmured, her voice soft and steady, like the gentlest of breezes. The words came out as barely a whisper, yet Thunder seemed to understand. He didn't pull back or shy away. On the contrary, he pressed his nose more firmly into her palm, as if exploring the texture of her skin, as if recognizing something familiar in her presence. From their vantage point, the boys exchanged bewildered glances. Their expressions, once filled with mockery and smug anticipation, now reflected confusion and disbelief. They couldn't comprehend how this was possible, how Thunder, the horse known for his guarded and aloof demeanor, was approaching Amanda with such trust. Alexander's brow furrowed, his lips curling into a frustrated grimace as his hands gripped the edge of the fence in a mix of irritation and fascination. How? How is she doing that?" one of the boys whispered, his voice filled with incredulity. No one answered. The truth wasn't something that could be put into words. It was there, in the silent bond unfolding between the girl and the stallion. After what felt like an eternity, Thunder lowered his head, his posture relaxing. Amanda accepted the gesture as if it were a gift, a quiet offering of trust. She seized the moment, her hand moving gently across his forehead, absorbing the warmth and strength that radiated from him. It was an almost sacred act, a silent communion between two beings who, at their core, understood each other without needing words. "Thank you, Thunder," she whispered, her fingers brushing through his mane with reverence. In that instant, she felt an unexpected surge of strength and confidence. She realized that even if things didn't change with the boys, or the challenges continued, she would always have this moment, this proof that respect and calmness could triumph over fear. The boys, meanwhile, began to step back, their bravado dissipating. The prank they had planned had taken a turn they hadn't anticipated. What was supposed to humiliate Amanda had transformed into something they couldn't quite comprehend. They watched, unsure of what to make of the scene unfolding before them. In the end, they slinked away in silence, carrying with them a lesson they might not fully grasp for years to come. Amanda remained beside Thunder, who now stood with his head lowered, his posture relaxed as if at peace in her presence. Yet for her, the moment wasn't over. With a blend of boldness and respect, she let her hands glide along the strong curve of his neck, feeling the tension in his muscles melt beneath her touch. A sudden impulse welled up inside her, a longing to experience his power more intimately. She had never dared to ride him before, especially not a horse as imposing as Thunder. But something inside her stirred, urging her forward. It wasn't just a whim. It felt like a calling, as though Thunder himself was inviting her, his deep, calm eyes conveying a trust she had never seen before. Cautiously, Amanda stepped onto the makeshift stirrup of the nearby fence. Holding on to his thick mane, she swung herself up in one fluid motion, landing atop Thunder's back. Her body trembled at first, her hands gripping tightly as she felt the rhythmic rise and fall of his breathing beneath her. Every nerve in her body was on high alert, yet an unexpected joy coursed through her, a heady mix of adrenaline and wonder at the unknown. Thunder didn't flinch or resist. Instead, he accepted her weight with a dignified calm, taking a deliberate step forward to test the ground. Then slowly, he began to walk. Each of his steps echoed like a drum beat in the midday sun, and Amanda felt the world around them expand, as though the corral could no longer contain the bond they had forged. The boys, who hadn't yet completely left, froze in their tracks. Their mocking expressions gave way to wide-eyed amazement. What they saw now wasn't the stable girl they had ridiculed countless times, but someone transformed, stronger, steadier, riding atop the powerful stallion they had all secretly feared. Amanda was aware of their stares but paid them no mind. Her entire focus was on Thunder, on the rhythm of his movements and the exhilarating sense of freedom swelling in her chest. For the first time, she felt truly connected, not just to the horse beneath her, but to a part of herself that had been waiting to emerge. As they reached the edge of the corral, she pressed her legs gently, signaling Thunder to stop. He obeyed immediately. Smiling, she leaned forward and stroked his neck, whispering words only for him to hear. Though he didn't respond with words, the way he turned his head and nuzzled her hand spoke volumes. The gesture filled Amanda with a deep, heartfelt joy. Then a familiar sound broke her reverie. From the entrance of the barn came the steady, deliberate footsteps of Mr. Harrison, the owner of the ranch. His weathered face, lined with years of experience, bore a mixture of astonishment and a trace of pride. He had been watching from a distance and now approached, his keen eyes taking in every detail of Amanda and Thunder. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and filled with respect. "What you've done here isn't a small thing." Amanda lowered her gaze, a faint blush coloring her cheeks, though her eyes sparkled with a hint of satisfaction. "I did it because I felt like he allowed me to," she said softly, struggling to articulate the deep, unspoken connection she had felt with Thunder. Mr. Harrison nodded slowly, understanding her without the need for further explanation. He turned his gaze toward the boys, who still stood awkwardly, unsure of how to respond. His expression hardened into one of stern authority. "You," he said firmly, his voice carrying weight, "planned a prank without considering the consequences. What you did was reckless and dangerous, not just for Amanda, but for Thunder as well. Animals are not toys, and respect for them is something you must never forget." The boys lowered their heads, shame washing over them. Some murmured quiet apologies, but Mr. Harrison wasn't finished. "Starting tomorrow, each of you will spend extra hours in the stables, caring for and cleaning up after the animals. That's how you'll learn the true meaning of respect and responsibility." His words were sharp, leaving no room for argument, and the boys nodded solemnly, accepting their reprimand without protest. Amanda watched the scene unfold, a quiet sense of peace settling over her. She knew this moment was more than just a lesson for the boys. It was one for all of them, herself included. Riding Thunder and earning his trust had awakened something inside her, something that made her feel stronger and more self-assured. As the boys trudged away, weighed down by their impending punishment, Amanda dismounted Thunder carefully, once again thanking him for the trust he had shown her. Mr. Harrison stepped closer, placing a firm yet gentle hand on her shoulder. "You have a gift, Amanda," he said warmly. "It's not something everyone has." Amanda smiled, a soft warmth blooming in her chest. Mr. Harrison's words affirmed what she had always sensed deep within herself. Her connection with animals, her love and respect for them, was more than a simple fondness. It was a part of who she was, something that defined her. In the days that followed the unexpected event in the corral, a subtle shift began to take place in the stables. The boys who had once laughed loudly and played rough jokes now passed Amanda with different expressions. Some curious, others tinged with a quiet respect they didn't quite know how to show. A new dynamic took root, a cautious distance that gradually softened over time. The routine of the stables, once lively with echoes of their laughter and games, grew quieter. Amanda moved through the aisles with her usual calm precision, her focus unwavering. Yet she could feel their eyes following her, watching with a newfound attentiveness. One afternoon, Alexander, who had often led the teasing, approached her hesitantly as she brushed the mane of a mare. "Amanda, hey!" he began, clearing his throat awkwardly. "What happened that day with Thunder?" "It was stupid, really stupid on our part." His voice, though steady, carried an uncharacteristic note of regret. Amanda paused, the bristles of the brush stilled in her hand. "I know, Alexander," she replied gently, her tone soft but firm. She turned to look at him, noticing the nervous way he fidgeted with the buckle of his belt. "And I know you didn't mean any harm, but there are things you just don't mess around with." He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping briefly before meeting hers again. A quiet moment settled between them, broken only by the mare's soft snort. Gradually, the other boys began to gather nearby, their expressions uncertain but expectant, as if waiting for a sign that things could return to normal, only this time a better, kinder normal. "Why are you so into horses, Amanda?" asked one of the younger boys. Harry, his tone laced not with mockery this time, but with genuine curiosity. Amanda sighed, allowing the flood of memories to surface. The stable had always been more than just a workplace for her. It was a sanctuary, a haven that provided the comfort her house never could. "When I was a little girl, my mum used to bring me here," she began, her voice tinged with a soft nostalgia. "She'd say that horses can sense what's inside us, that they know how to listen without judgment." After she passed away, these animals were the only part of her I had left. Here in the stable, I feel like I can still hear her advice. Like the wind through the pastures carries her words back to me. The boys listened in silence, each affected in their own way by the weight of her words. The air in the stable grew warmer, more intimate. Alexander, who had never truly experienced a loss so profound, felt a sharp pang in his chest, a newfound respect for the girl he had underestimated for so long. "You know," Amanda continued, steering the conversation away from its heavy tone, "caring for horses isn't easy. It takes patience, and it reminds me that life does too. Not everything happens quickly or effortlessly. Learning to wait, that's one of the lessons these horses teach me every day." "We could help more," Harry offered with a shy smile, his sincerity evident. "Not just the easy stuff. Really help." Amanda smiled and nodded. It wasn't the kind of offer she had expected, but something in the way they had looked at her, listened to her, made her realize she had taken a step closer to them, and they to her. In the days that followed, the boys began working alongside her. At first, their efforts were clumsy, riddled with small mistakes, but over time, their help became more earnest, more reliable. Amanda, who had always preferred the quiet companionship of horses, found herself growing accustomed to their voices, their occasional laughter, and the questions they tossed her way as they cleaned stalls or fetched water for the animals. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Amanda led Thunder, the stallion, to a nearby meadow. The trust between them had grown so deeply that their time together was no longer marked by the tension of those early days. Watching from a distance, the boys grew curious, drawn by the quiet bond Amanda seemed to share with the horse. "How did you get him to trust you?" Alexander asked, his voice a mix of admiration and wonder. Amanda stroked Thunder's forehead, the horse responding with a low snort and a flick of his ears. "It didn't happen overnight," she replied, her gaze never leaving the animal. "It was slow, built over time with patience, like any true friendship." The boys fell silent, realizing that Amanda's lesson wasn't just about caring for a horse, it was about life itself. From that day forward, they not only worked together, but also laughed and shared stories. Their friendship grew naturally, rooted in mutual respect and understanding. The stable, once just a workplace filled with the echoes of mocking laughter and the crunch of boots on dry dirt, began to change. It became warmer, more human. The transformation wasn't instant, but the seeds of camaraderie and respect Amanda had sown with her courage and dedication began to bloom. Mr. Harrison, the stable's owner, was always present, a constant figure with sharp, watchful eyes that had witnessed many seasons come and go. He had seen the boys join Amanda in her tasks, watched as arguments diminished and laughter grew more genuine, free of malice. He knew it was time to reinforce the lesson they had all, himself included, learned. One late afternoon, as the sun cast a golden glow over the barn, painting it in warm, amber hues, the soft snorts of horses filled the air. Mr. Harrison gathered the kids and Amanda beneath the weathered wooden roof, the gentle rustling of leaves and faint movements of the animals, their only backdrop. "Today I want to talk about what it truly means to be here," he began, his deep, steady voice capturing everyone's attention. "This place isn't just where we take care of horses, it's where we learn to be better, not just for ourselves, but for those around us." The kids exchanged glances, some lowering their heads as they remembered their own past missteps. Amanda, standing beside Thunder, listened intently. Her heartbeat was calm but resolute, her gaze steady. "Amanda has taught us a lesson," Mr. Harrison continued, his eyes moving across the group. "She's shown us that trust and patience can transform everything. She's not only earned Thunder's respect, but ours as well." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. Alexander, once the most stubborn and mischievous of the bunch, raised his head and gave a small nod, a hint of a smile playing on his lips, a gesture that Amanda returned, light but genuine. The barn seemed to reflect the shift in the air and among its walls. The kids who once vied to crack the sharpest joke or evade the toughest chores now worked side by side, sharing stories and advice that made the long days feel shorter. Unknowingly, Amanda had become a pillar, not just for the younger ones, but even for the seasoned workers who had spent years at the barn. They looked at her with a blend of admiration and warmth, recognizing in her the dedication some had lost over time. Thunder, the once fiery stallion known for his untamed spirit, now walked beside Amanda with a calmness that amazed everyone. There was a silent understanding between them, a bond forged through time and mutual respect. Even the other horses seemed to relax in Thunder's presence, as though his transformation resonated throughout the barn. "Seems like Thunder's grown soft," Harry remarked one evening while brushing a gray mare. The group laughed, but the laughter held no mockery, only affection and a shared camaraderie. "It's because he knows there's someone who understands him now," Amanda replied, her hands gently stroking Thunder's mane. Her words lingered in the air, met with nods and knowing smiles. As time passed, the barn became more than just a place to work. It evolved into a community where people cared for one another. Petty squabbles were settled with words, not pranks, and chores were completed with a collective effort. Mr. Harrison watched this transformation with quiet satisfaction, knowing the harmony they had achieved wasn't easy to come by. One morning, with the sun high and the mountains casting long shadows over the fields, Mr. Harrison approached Amanda as she cleaned the feeding troughs. "You've done more for this place than most do in a lifetime," he said, his voice tinged with rare emotion. Startled by the weight of his words, Amanda looked up. "I just did what felt right," she answered with her characteristic humility. "And that," Mr. Harrison replied, resting a hand on her shoulder, "is exactly what makes all the difference." The change in the barn didn't go unnoticed by visitors. They remarked on the warmth and unity that seemed to permeate the air, often asking about the young woman with an uncanny gift for connecting with both people and horses. And so, what began as a cruel prank transformed into an extraordinary opportunity for growth, as Amanda forged an unbreakable bond with Thunder, the fierce stallion once considered untamable. Her story not only changed the hearts of those who once ridiculed her, but also inspired all of us to face our challenges with a brave heart and sincere kindness. From the initial tense moments to the moving scene where Thunder allowed her to ride him, every step of this journey has taught us that every challenge carries a valuable lesson, and that respect and love can overcome even the toughest obstacles. If you found this story as inspiring as we did, be sure to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel so you won't miss out on more uplifting videos and incredible stories. Join our community of nature lovers and truth seekers, and let's continue to be inspired by the remarkable journeys that life has to offer. Subscribe today and let the adventure continue.